are Democrats but are afraid to say that they're Democrats because they live next door to a Republican, or their husband is a Republican, or something like that. And we're trying to make sure that folks are comfortable with saying, "Hey, I'm a Democrat," because there's so many more Democrats here that just haven't been active in the process. And we always say in our office is the 4th Congressional District is way more progressive than what folks put it out to be. Mississippi is not as red as people think it is, but because of the folks who have become disengaged in the process, it does appear that way. So what we're doing throughout this campaign is we're energizing and making people excited to get out and get involved in the process. And at the same time, we're also getting Republicans who say, well, I'm fed up with our current congressman because I can't get in contact with them. I can't get a meeting with them. I can't get a return phone call from them. And before you can go into any issues, you've got to make sure that you have somebody that's accessible and accountable to you, because at the end of the day, we work for the people.
I've seen on your social media some pictures and things that you've had with David Beria and Mike Espy. How much of a difference do you think it makes with people running sort of up and down the ticket, sort of joining forces and working together and having 2 Senate candidates on the ticket in the same year?
Yeah, it's definitely helpful, and especially the 3 of us. And I always look at it from a collaborative effort. Mike Espy, who's very, very well known, Mike can deliver on the turning out the African-American votes, in better numbers than it has been previously. David Beria can maximize on, our white Democrats in the district. And then my job to me is to make sure that I'm energizing millennials to get out and vote. And if we can cover all 3 of those bases, then I think that collectively, we're going to have 3 great congressmen going to Washington.
So you mentioned over the past week, so what you were doing over the past week is something you were calling the People's Tour. What all did that involve? What kinds of places were you going and talking? Who were the kinds of people that you were meeting?
Sure. So the People's Tour was a week-long tour. We visited 14 counties in 7 days, which is about 19 to 20 cities within the 14 counties. And our whole purpose for that was to really get out and connect with people into areas that we did not traditionally hit earlier on. In some of those areas we did, but what we did throughout that week was we had meet and greets at local eateries and local establishments within that county, within that city. And we also had massive canvassing efforts, phone banking, and met with local officials throughout the week. But it was our second hit for a lot of these cities, and for some of them it was our first. But what it did was laid the groundwork for the campaign leading into October, because we plan to hit those communities again. But it was something that had not been done before, and our whole goal was to get out and meet people in those communities to figure out what the problems were, to figure out what the issues were across the district, and to see if there was some type of connection between the problems that existed in, let's say, Jones County that were also existing in places like Forest County or Jackson County, and to come up with solutions and to start looking at ways that we can improve those problems. And at the same time, energizing folks and letting them know about the importance of the election on November 6th. And I think that we accomplished that.
Excellent. Is there anything else, any other issues that you want to make sure that we talk about?
Yeah, we definitely need to make sure people understand the importance of the November 6th election. As we traveled throughout the district during that tour, there were several folks that we heard, and not just Democrats, that just said that they're afraid of what, if we don't get congressmen and women who believe and enforce the system of checks and balances, then they are afraid of what the next 2 years look like. Because we've got congressmen and women that are going along just to get along and are afraid to check the president, check the speakers on things that they know is not right and not progressive and good for this country and good for this state. And that's one thing that we want people to understand, that this race in November cannot afford to be based on partisan gridlock and partisan party lines. It has to be about electing people that will go to Washington to represent your interests and to stand with people. We've got too many congressmen and women who have pledged their support to the president and have completely pushed their constituency aside. That is not who I am. That is not who this district will be electing in November. They're electing somebody that will always stand up for them, that will keep them at the forefront of every policy and make sure that the interests of the state of Mississippi is protected over any party, over any president, over any leader. The people of Mississippi will always come first, and it's important that folks understand the difference between myself and my opponent.
If our listeners would like to help out your campaign, how can they do that?
Helping out the campaign is very important. We need voices, we need hands, and of course we need contributions to keep the fight going. You can do that by visiting JerameyForMississippi.com and on all social sites at Jeramey4MS. And we'd love to have your support as we move into these last, I think, 41 days for Election Day. Volunteering is so critical right now. And we have a system now where you can call from home, phone bank from home, to call voters in our district, and we so drastically need that. Also, postcard writing has proven to be very, very effective. We need that. And then we also need canvassers, folks who are willing to walk down the street with us and knock on doors. But more so than anything, we need folks to help us out, because this race is well within our reach, but we can't do it by ourselves.
Excellent. We'll make sure we put those links up on our website as well. So, Jeramey, I want to thank you so much both for talking with me and for running. I've got 2 little sons who are starting to get interested and involved in politics, and I think it's so important for them to see people who are not that much older than them who are stepping up and running and really making a difference. So I think it's so great.
That is true. And tell your sons we need them. We need them to run. We need them involved in the process. It's so important.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that they know all about your campaign. So thank you. I think it's truly inspirational. I mean, you're almost young enough to be my son, but instead of feeling like I'm old, I'm going to be really proud of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
Oh, didn't see you there. I'm Molly.
And I'm Jen.
And we're Rosemary's Ladies, a podcast where we eat snacks, drink adult beverages, and review movies, the good and the bad. Previous reviews include Deep Blue Sea, Poltergeist, Leprechaun, and 1998's Godzilla. You can tune in on iTunes, Spotify, and most popular podcast apps.
And for Pete's sake, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and check us out at rosemariesladies.com, where you can submit movies for us to review.
I'm here in this segment with Paul Theobald, who is running for Congress in the Nebraska 3rd District. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Kelly.
Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Could you start by just telling our listeners a little bit about your background and why you decided to run for Congress?
Sure. I'm a 40-year veteran of public education, initially in secondary schools and then at the university level, but always with a focus on rural education, rural places, rural schools, rural universities. I spent the bulk of my career at Wayne State College, or a big chunk of it anyway, which is in not Wayne State University in Michigan, it's Wayne State College in Nebraska, and that's where we raised our children and so on. We did leave the state for a while, but my wife had kind of explicit instructions that as soon as we had grandchildren, we were moving back. So we moved back, and we live about 45 miles west of Wayne, Nebraska now on a little farm. I do some consulting work in education circles, but I also raise hogs to kind of augment our income as we kind of move into the retirement phase. I'm going to need that supplemental income. But anyway, I think the point is that I've been a rural person all my life. My grandparents on both sides were small farmers. None of them were able to maintain or keep their farms. My father was a rural mail carrier. And as I said, I've taught in rural schools and universities for 40 years. I think we have some interesting circumstances in Nebraska. We have only 3 congressional districts, as you know. And you've had a conversation with at least one of them, Jessica McClure, out of the 1st district, which is Lincoln and a couple small cities on the eastern side. And then there's the 2nd district, which is Omaha and suburbs. And then there's the 3rd district, which is literally everything else. And I think neither our 2nd district Democratic nominee, Cara Eastman, and our 1st district nominee, Jessica McClure, we weren't politicians, any of the 3 of us, on November 9th, 2016. I always refer to that as the day democracy died. And we, over the ensuing month, obviously became citizen politicians standing up to fight for the restoration of democracy. And, that's kind of the way it worked for me, too. Subtle difference, or a slight difference, is that in 2016, nobody challenged our incumbent in the 3rd District. He ran unopposed. And I just couldn't countenance that thought. And, I was reluctant. Mostly I was trying to recruit people to do it. And then one day my wife ran across this quote from some Englishman. I guess it's a fairly well-known quote, but it had eluded us, my wife and I, for 62 years. And the quote was, "We are the people we've been waiting for." And, when she told me that, we just kind of kept moving in the direction of stepping up to do this. And so we finally did about the end of October last year. We decided to do this. So here we are.
All right. And you mentioned this is the rest of Nebraska. So this is an extremely large district, extremely rural district, and is, at least on paper, one of the most Republican districts in the country. So tell me a little bit about campaigning there. How do you campaign in a district that's this huge? And what are you hearing from people as you talk to them?
Okay, well, you're right. It is the largest, geographically, it is the largest congressional district that is not an entire state. So it is huge. I mean, from the Iowa border in the southeast to the Colorado border in the southwest, from the Iowa border in the northeast to the Wyoming border in the northwest. I have literally worn out in 6 months a set of tires. And incidentally, I've got a group of supporters in Kearney that are doing, I think, a GoFundMe page to buy new tires for me, which is interesting and obviously very nice gesture. So that's how you do it, though. I mean, one of my colleagues calls it accumulating road dust. And I just drive and drive and drive and drive all over the district. And you're right, on paper, it's a heavily Republican district, but there are circumstances at play at the moment, as I'm sure you're aware. You may not be real immersed in rural issues, but you don't have to. I mean, just a casual observer knows that the developments under this administration have been awfully hard on rural America, and that really includes rural Nebraska in that. So. But in the last part of the question, what are you hearing out there? Initially, it was all about health care. The 3rd District is one of the heaviest users of the ACA on a per capita basis. And of course, they keep messing with it, chipping away at it, doing this, doing that, and the premiums keep going up and up and up. And this is a huge concern out in the 3rd District because we're not wealthy out there. You probably are aware of the fact that the rural population has the largest segment of people living in poverty. It's eclipsed the rates in inner cities, for instance. 3rd District median income is about almost $12,000 below the national median income. And what that means, of course, is that we can't afford the most expensive healthcare system on the planet. So healthcare is a huge concern, and always tragic stories, Kelly, as I'm sure you hear all the time as well. I mean, it is just ripping families apart. But more recently, with what this administration had to do or has done with his very, I think, careless and ill thought out trade wars, is dramatically diminishing rural income, which spills over. Of course, this is for farmers and ranchers, but they spend their money, obviously, in communities and businesses, which now are being deprived of those dollars. States being deprived of tax receipts. I mean, it is just a downward spiral. And our congressional delegation, completely Republican, they're all sort of hoping nobody notices, trying to keep their heads down. None of them are willing to, well, I shouldn't say none of them. Ben Sasse stands up and challenges the president. The problem, of course, with Ben is that it's a little bit like the boy who cried wolf. He talks a good game, but then he votes for the president every time. And so, it's hard to get too excited about what Ben Sasse is saying. But the rest of them, of course, are saying nothing, and they're afraid of Trump, and they're not willing to stick their necks out on behalf of their own constituents. So it's